Morning, Jarrah.
Good morning. Hello, everybody, and you're very welcome. It's lovely to see into so many people's sitting rooms. I feel like I'm actually leaving the house, if you know what I mean, and seeing people.
I didn't think you could see us.
Where I am sitting, there are screens here and loads of screens over here as well. So don't do anything that you don't want me to see is the rules that I would give. One of the things that I'm going to ask you all to do, or I'm going to get the system to do, is I'm going to get them to mute your microphones until the end. So we will take questions and answers for Fiona or myself at the end of this call, at the end of this session, rather than going through, because we have a few things that we would like to show you. So keep your notes or use the chat functionality in Zoom if you know how to do that as well. We welcome your questions. The second thing is to welcome you to a 200-year-old building on the banks of the Liffey called CHQ. I'm not sure if many of you would know it by that name. It used to be called Stack A. It looks a bit like a glass-fronted warehouse from the front, and we're just down the road from the Customs House. We're on the Red Lewis line, and we're in the middle of the IFSC, the Irish Financial Services Centre. And what happens in this building is a number of things. Where we are now, Dogpatch Labs is a big space for technology companies to get together and do their work. There is a museum that I will tell you about in just a couple of moments. And part of that museum is the Irish Family History Centre. And Fiona beside me is one of the expert genealogists who works with the Irish Family History Centre. And Fiona will be talking about some of the work that she has done with people that you will recognize as well. But firstly, I'm going to ask my colleague Flavia here to play the video about EPIC to tell you a little bit more about what that is.
Over the centuries, some 10 million people left the island of Ireland. Now you can travel in their footsteps and discover how this small island made such a big impression on the world. Experience over 300 remarkable tales of adventure, sacrifice, and triumph. Follow their hopes and dreams. Celebrate their victories. See life through their eyes. Uncover rogues and wretches and their notorious legacies. Sing the songs they took with them and dance to their tune. Be inspired by their creativity. Hear their captivating stories. Explore new worlds and meet some unforgettable characters. Journey through 1,500 years of Irish history, brought to life like never before at the world's first fully digital museum, EPIC, the Irish Emigration Museum.
Can I get a show of hands of the people who have their cameras on? How many of you had heard of us before? How many of you have been in to see us? Oh, well done. Did you enjoy it? Yeah, I'm seeing nodding. That's very good. Thank you. And Fiona, you're part of the Irish Family History Centre, which is part of EPIC. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, once visitors have actually walked through EPIC, the museum, and experienced experienced what is there to be seen, and also learned about some of the stories that are chronicled through EPIC. Visitors then have a chance to come to us in the Family History Centre and to actually begin to research, to find out about their own personal family history narrative.
Now, one of the things that's important is, and a lot of people have this idea that this museum or the Irish Family History Centre or genealogy research actually is only really for Irish Americans or for the people whose great-great-great-grandfather left Sligo many years ago. But you take everybody.
Yeah, I think we've blown that out of the water in the last 20 odd years or so. We've had a digital revolution, part of the reason why we're here with EPIC, and why everyone is here online this morning. But another side of that is that the web is crying out for content. And one of the first things that began to be digitized were historic records. There's more than there's more than 100 million unique Irish records that have been digitized and placed online. And it's now possible to trace virtually every Irish family back to the 1830s.
Wow, that's amazing. Have many of you ever researched your family history and seen, for example, your parents' wedding certificate or their baptism certificate or anything? Show of hands. So a few of you. It's very emotive for people. It's very emotional for people to see this, because for some of them, it's their first time seeing their parents' handwriting or grandparents' handwriting.
You're absolutely right. Not just that, but I remember the very first time I saw the 1901 census filled out by my great-grandfather.
Right.
And suddenly I realized that my father's handwriting and my own handwriting were virtually identical.
Wow.
So there's a certain strange kind of hereditary or a thread that you actually see through time as well. That's kind of fun.
You have a presentation for us, so I'm going to let you flick through your slides there and help our people find out a little bit more about what you do.
Okay, well, let's take a look if I can just get this going. EPIC, of course, is the Family History Centre is attached to EPIC, the Irish Emigration Museum of Dublin. EPIC tells the story of the Irish people who left Ireland over 1,500 years. And the diaspora brought their culture with them. They influenced and they shaped the world. The museum is located in the CHQ building on Custom House Quay. And the Jeannie Johnson, our replica famine ship, is moored outside on the Liffey. That's also part of the museum. You can actually include it as part of your visit. EPIC is open, of course, 7 days a week, year-round. I think the only days it's closed are Christmas Day and Stephen's Day.
Stephen's Day this year we're open, actually. So if people are looking for something to do after Christmas, come on down.
An unprecedented year. So yes, so you can also go online for a virtual visit. It is a 21st century museum experience. Visitors can walk through the connecting galleries, each one exploring a different theme. My own favorites are music and dance, fashion. I love the Science Gallery. It actually showcases inventions by Irish scientists. And I also love the Rogues Gallery, which showcases some of the notorious Irish. To my surprise, it actually appeals to everybody. My mother-in-law was visiting from Canada. So I had my mother-in-law and 3 kids who were dying to see Granny. And I wondered how I would cater for an 80-year-old, a 16, 14 and 9-year-old, plus the 9-year-old's friend who was on a play date.
Wow.
But to my surprise, we managed to actually go right through the gallery. And everybody came out really having enjoyed it. By highlighting Ireland's emigrant experiences as well, the museum is also relevant, I believe, to what's happening today. At the moment, we're experiencing probably the greatest displacement of people in history through poverty, through climate change, and through conflict. And that's something that our president, Michael D., highlighted when he congratulated EPIC recently on winning the second year in a row, the European Tourist Awards. So worth actually emphasizing. But if EPIC chronicles the stories of some of the emigrants that left, in the Irish Family History Centre, we are here to help you to research your own family story. We employ a team of researchers, and here are some of them, professional genealogists. We have access to unique online records. We also know our way around the archives and libraries in Ireland in a way that's second to none. Since 2005, we've worked on Who Do You Think You Are? As it was rolled out around the world in the UK, Australia, the Netherlands, South Africa, the US. We've provided the Irish research for Finding Your Roots with Henry Louis Gates. We've worked to commission with a number of prominent individuals, including the former White House under President Obama and then Vice President Biden, now of course President-elect Biden. In 2011, the White House contacted us. They wanted to use our research to set the itinerary for President Obama's visit to Ireland. Obama is a hard-headed individual, but when he was standing inside the house that his ancestors left, he suddenly got a look in his eye and he asked, so what part is original? What part would they have lived in? And we were able to answer that.
Wow.
That's how good the records are.
Very good.
On the back of that, in 2013, when Michelle Obama personally requested that I present the family history to her 2 daughters. And I think should have a photograph on screen.
We're just having a couple of technical difficulties, but where is it? But so
we met in Trinity College.
Yes.
And Dara, teenagers are a hard audience.
Oh, listen, when you were doing that, I had the 2 girls and Michelle Obama in to see Riverdance, which I worked on at the start. And there's this amazing photo of the 2 girls like this. Oh, it fell there, like this, before Riverdance started, because they were bored waiting for it. And people were trying to say, oh, the girls were bored of Riverdance, which of course they weren't. They were lovely, lovely people.
Yeah, they're really nice kids, really nice young women, I should say. But that youngest girl as well has a particular interest in dance. So I think it was actually very well chosen to bring her to Riverdance. Teenagers are a hard audience, but they have some fantastic stories in their family background and their family history. And we actually got a couple of belly laughs from all of them. So I'm confident the girls got a kick out of it in the end. And it's just reaching across and being able to find a way, common ground. That's really it. In April 2016 then, the White House again contacted us in the Irish Family History Centre. They wanted us to research Vice President Biden's Irish ancestry ahead of his visit in 2016, and that was just 9 weeks away. Now, once again, the research we did set the itinerary for his visit. So no pressure, but we were doing the research and we were sending it back to the White House on a week-by-week basis, and they were then going and sending out their security teams. I always say that the Secret Service blew their cover sooner than we did, because they were driving along to the Cooley Peninsula and to places in Ballina in long black limousines with the windows blacked out, so everyone immediately guessed what was happening. The research we did set the itinerary, and in June 2016, about 9 weeks later, we presented the research to the extended Biden family. Then for the next 5 days, I accompanied them around Ireland. On screen is a family tree for the Blewett family of Mayo and the Finnegans in County Louth. Now, if you want to actually learn more about the Biden's family tree and about the family history, there's some great stories there, and it's published in the Irish Family History Centre's free online magazine, Irish Lives Remembered. It's free to read, but you do have to register with the website. We just had to put it behind a wall.
We will share this information with Billy, who will send it out as part of after the talk. So you won't miss out on anything.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Well, this is simply a tree that shows descent. So we don't have absolutely every single family member in here.
Of course.
The Blewett family in the 1830s worked for the Ordnance Survey. So they quite literally put Mayo on the map.
Right.
We've had records in the employment records. The Finnegan family from County Louth had a different kind of a story. In 1813, John Finnegan married Mary Carney in County Louth. These would be Joe Biden's great ×3 grandparents. Both the families would have been subsistence level farmers, but the Kearney clan also had an entrepreneurial streak. Their farm ran along the coast. Do you see that little hook in the map that's on screen right now? Well, that is where their farm was. It's known locally as Maranathraw, quite literally the edge of the beach. The Carneys salvaged everything that washed up, and because they were on that hook, they were much more likely to catch what came up.
Right.
And they salvaged everything, including rotting seaweed, which they then gathered and they sold for 8 shillings a hundredweight to the neighbours to use as manure.
Wow.
Now, the kind of curious thing about this, and the reason we found out about it, is because in 1770, their landlord caught wind of what it was that they were up to. And the landlord wrote a letter of stinking invective, is what I can only describe it as. He wrote to his steward complaining that he wasn't getting a cut. And the address on the landlord's letter was Townley Hall, which is this stately pile here. And there's something kind of Scrooge-like about that, that you're living in a place like this and you're complaining that you're not getting a cut from 8 shillings a hundredweight. You know, that's
Sure.
backbreaking work.
Sure.
And if you've ever walked along a beach, it also rotting seaweed
Oh,
smells.
yeah, it's not great.
So they were earning their money. Now, Mayo was very definitely the public part of Joe Biden's visit. He presented himself to every local politician. Local people turned out. They met every GAA club, every trad music, kids dancing troops. But they did that because when they visited Louth, they actually kept it as private as possible. And although local people still met in the town in Carlingford, it was much quieter, it was much more private and much more managed. It was to allow the family a little bit of time. One of the main reasons for this visit was, in a way, it was almost a leave-taking of Joe Biden's mother and his son. The original idea for the trip came from his son, who subsequently died from cancer. So this was a chance for the family to come together, meet some cousins, and have a little bit of private time. On Saturday afternoon, we sat down to lunch with more than 100 Carney cousins. His great-great-great-grandmother was a Carney, and these are the living relatives. The last of the Finnegans died, I think, in the area in the 1950s, but we did find Carney cousins.
Wow.
So kind of cool.
Yeah.
So that's all well and good when it comes to, at the time, a vice president, now a presidential candidate. But what about the rest of us? Why should we want to research? Well, family history is based on the simple but powerful idea that everybody has a story that is worth knowing and worth keeping for posterity. In our approach, we deliberately emphasize that we want to look at all the family, not just the direct line of descent. I have aunts and uncles who never married, great aunts and great uncles who never married. They still contributed to my family story, not least in terms of their putting their wages, because hardship is something we've known a lot about in Ireland in the past. I also say as well, if you leave out the women in your family history, you lose half the narratives. The Cruise family for Tom Cruise actually comes in his maternal line,
Right.
a number of generations back. So even if your family aren't hoarders, there's probably a good deal of evidence to get started on your family history in your own home. And these are the most common kinds of evidence we find. First of all, family stories. These are the kind of stories that explain who we are and why we are here now. Every family has them. The personal paperwork, this is the kind of stuff we keep on file to try and negotiate modern life. I think we all have births, marriages, and deaths. You had a recent birth in the family, so I bet you've got, congratulations.
Oh my God, we have so much paperwork. Wow.
But you've got another civil birth recently, I would imagine.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think every family has that. And increasingly as we age, you might also have things like, say, a will, if you've acted as an executor for a family member's estate. Photo albums, boxes of photographs. Nowadays, we tend to keep a lot of our photographs in the cloud. Personal letters and postcards. I have a collection of postcards. My dad was in the Merchant Navy, and he sent them to his sister, my aunt, when she was in boarding school, because she hated school. She hated being away from the family. And she was doing a clear out, and suddenly she presented me with more than 200 postcards sent from all around the world. And it's a lovely thing to have, just little messages sent from an older brother to his younger sister. We all tend to have keepsakes and artifacts. The kind of thing I'm thinking about are the kind of hospital band from a baby's wrist that you keep.
Yep.
Sometimes I've seen people with a little flower from their wedding day. One of the most common ones is sadly memorial cards.
Sure.
I think we all have some of those. And for the rest of this talk, we're going to look at two of these, the family stories and the photo albums, and see what kind of evidence they may have.
Okay.
that you can use in your family history. One of the first ways that we encounter our family history is through stories. We're all experts in our own family narrative. We've acquired it by osmosis growing up. Since we were children, in the places we lived or the places we visited, the people we grew up knowing, we visit in each other's houses. We meet regularly at family events, at baptisms, naming ceremonies, anniversaries, funerals, weddings, at community events. And I'm thinking here now, something like a GAA match, or something like the Pattern Day. My family have lived in Dublin for the last 50 years, almost 2 generations. We still go to the Pattern Day in County Louth, as does my husband to his home county in County Wexford.
Oh, very good.
It's a pattern, it's a tradition which actually is observed by all faith traditions, surprisingly.
I'm
There's
from
not that
rural
many.
Kilkenny, so in Graignamanagh we had a pattern around Michaelmas.
Okay.
And then Burris, County Carlow, had a very famous pattern, as did St. Mullins down in Carlow, if any of the people watching know it. So still going strong. Smaller, but
it's still there.
Yeah.
That blessing of the graves is quite important.
Absolutely.
But the other thing is it's observed by people of all faith communities. And that is extraordinary because there's not that many things that cut across all the different churches in Ireland. But these are the times that we come together and that we often share stories. Now, as a child, I used to love asking my granny about what life was like in the good old days. And she was still in her 50s at the time.
Nice.
So I'm that age now, and it seems like the height of cheek to ask a lady a question like that. But she was very fond of me. She was a great storyteller as well. I only wish that I had taped our conversations. Here's a set of guidelines that I have put together to help you document your own family histories. And this is going to go out as a handout at the end.
Yes, exactly, yes.
Brilliant. Okay, so first of all, ask yourself, who do you want as your witnesses? Draw up a list of the people that you want to talk to and what you want to ask them about. And remember that no one person has every part of the story. I like to use visual prompts. Photographs are fantastic to try and unlock old memories. My granny and I used to often look at photographs together, and she'd tell me what was happening in the photograph, and she'd describe the people. So I have family stories that from generations, even before I was born. Try to persuade the person that you're interviewing to allow you to tape them. If you can do that, you will very quickly build up your own sound archive. But do remember that if you intend to publish any part of this on a blog or even in a family history newsletter, you have to get their written permission.
Sure.
It's always better to ask upfront as well. Do you know what? In 25 years, no one has ever said no to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good.
So people do like to have a record made. If the person you're interviewing is a distant cousin or somebody you haven't seen in a while, do a little bit of background research. Check what's been going on in their lives. Find out if they are married, separated, divorced, widowed, if there's been any event in the family. Because in a sense, you're relying on that shared sense of family intimacy and trust. So you don't want to kind of drop a clanger as in the course of the conversation. I always say prepare a list of questions so that you have some kind of a structure to the conversation. It can even just be a list of subjects you want to talk about. Listen carefully to what the person says. Try and hear if they are giving you any prompts to steer the conversation in a particular direction. To talk about other things that may be relevant as well. Keep the interview short. I think 30 minutes is good enough. You don't want to make it a chore for the person you're interviewing.
Sure.
Remember as well that you're going to have to transcribe all this. So you don't want to make it too hard for yourself.
And Fiona, when we talk about interviews, we don't really mean what I'm doing here with you which is quite formal. This can actually be over a cup of tea, a phone in the middle with the voice recorder on and having a chat and saying, tell me about Mum, tell me about Dad, tell me about Uncle Billy, tell me about that. And those ones can actually be better chats than the, hello, could you tell me about, you know?
Nah, you don't want it to be formal. You actually want to, just let the conversation flow. So yeah, a pot of tea, some mince pies. They're in my mind at the moment. I wonder why. Anything that would ease the conversation like that. And when you finish, thank them and offer you should really offer as a gesture, but also as a matter of courtesy, to give them a transcript of the interview to fact check. Now, once you've taped an interview, you have to transcribe it, and this is very time consuming. If you don't do this, however, you won't fix the facts in your own mind. If you're like me as well, it may actually only be in the transcribing that you realize you've missed a prompt. This is another good reason to have a reason to go back and talk to them again, offering them the transcript, because it gives you a second chance to ask the question you may have missed the first time around. If you think they still have more good information, ask them for a second interview. Don't pester them if they say no, and allow a proper time before you ask them again. This is meant to be about family history, so you want to create a good sense as you are proceeding with this. Once you have typed up a transcript of the interview, then you have to come to weigh up the evidence, and this is where you get to play family detective. Ask yourself, is the story that is being told an eyewitness account, somebody who was there at the event, or is it hearsay? Well, my mum told me that, or Granny told me that this happened in the old days. Now, this is very similar to the distinction that historians make between primary and secondary source. Ask yourself, do the stories agree with, or do they contradict stories told by other family members? Funnily enough, I actually love when the stories diverge. It's not about conflict, but it's about trying to find the difference in perception, because that's usually where the really interesting stories actually lie. Does the story have facts or dates or events that can be independently verified? Or can you anchor the story by background events that are happening? Very commonly, we might hear a story where the background is the land war or the Fenian Rising. That's a lovely one because it means we can actually plonk it right down in 1867. The famine means that we have a canvas from 1845 to 51 to try and hone in on our story. When you have the stories, start to write them up and write them into your family history, but clearly cite them as being a story told, an oral tradition that's passed down. And the form of citation that the universities accept is per person. This also allows the later generation to see where it came from. And I suppose the thing is that in family history, we have to a certain extent, be doubting Thomases. So we have to question everything. And this is not to say that people in the past knew less or are trying to pull the wool over our eyes, but it's just that perception really is everything. And it comes back to this idea that no one person has every part of the story. So, try and get a couple of interviews from people who were actually there. And do use them in your family history. It's a great way of opening up conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lovely reason to contact somebody.
It
To say, come
absolutely
here,
is.
I may not have a reason to contact you weekly, but I'm doing a project. Will you help me with it? So, yeah.
And it's something that you can both get something out of when it's done as well. Okay, so that's the stories, the family stories that are passed down, between the generations. Now, the second source I want to consider are photographs. Photographs are, I think it's true to say, some of our prized possessions. They don't necessarily have a resale or a market value, but they're irreplaceable if we lose them or if they are destroyed. This is something I hear from people who have lost things in fires, that what is irreplaceable are the lost photos. Photography would have been invented about 1839, and it changed the way that we look at the world, but also how we perceive ourselves, not least in grooming. If you look at photographs of people in the 1860s, 70s, 80s, you'll find that men's beards aren't as groomed. Women's hair isn't quite as pristine.
Listen, I am pre-lockdown haircut, so I feel I know what you're talking about. Some people are asking me if I'm auditioning for Santa early, which,
Well, and clothes are mended as well. So photography, the way that suddenly we became more self-conscious about the version of ourselves that we present to the outside world, Within 50 years, photography was accessible to the working man and woman, because women always worked in the past. It's an illusion that women entering the workplace is only a modern phenomenon.
Sure.
The first Kodak box camera was introduced in 1888. I hadn't realized it was quite that early until I began looking at the history of photography. By World War I, virtually everybody has after World War I, everyone has a camera at home. They begin taking snapshots. Every home has a collection of family photographs passed down through one or more generations. Different processes would produce different types of formats of photograph. And knowing what kind of print is in your family collection can actually sometimes help you to pin a date down when the photograph was taken, even just down to a decade, or sometimes to a couple of years. And again, if anybody would like to go on to Irish Lives Remembered magazine, one of the most popular features we have is the photo detective. Jane Shrimpton, who has worked with the National Portrait Gallery in England, trained in the Quarto Institute, and she will actually look at family photographs, and she can often hone in on details of dress and jewelry and hairstyle, and she can often identify down to within 1 or 2 years as to when a photograph was taken, based on the content.
I think it's extraordinary that all of our parents and grandparents are possibly in other people's photographs, walking by somewhere or whatever, and we may never see them. We may never know that our grandmother was in the background of that photo.
But isn't that another very good idea?
Isn't
Another
it?
good reason to get in touch with more distant cousins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary because I never met my grandparents, so it's that whole thing. I'm fascinated by what they looked like, what they dressed, and everything like that. And yeah, I have 6 photographs of them. But you know what? I have 6 photographs maybe of me growing up as well. So my children have 6 photographs of them taken every day. So it's a big difference for people.
Technology really is changing everything.
Absolutely.
But I bet if you actually contacted distant cousins, you get another 6 photographs from each one.
Sure.
And so on. These are the main kinds of photographic prints you'll find. Daguerreotypes, ambrotypes, carte de visite. Let me walk you through each one with some really nice examples, and you can see what I'm talking about. Daguerreotypes would have been the earliest photo images. They're made directly onto a silvered copper plate, and they usually have a frame. They very often would be maybe 6 by 8 inches. They could be carried around. They were portable. This is a lovely one from the Eastman Museum collection. Ambrotypes used glass plate negatives. And if you look at this type here, you'll see that the glass is broken. So you can actually see that we have the negative underneath of what would have been the other half of that photograph, the lady's arm and her hand in her lap. But the negative is actually embedded in the glass. Again, this would be early 1850s, 1860s onwards. The carte de visite, these produced several small negatives onto one card. And the prints would be pasted onto card mounts, usually the size of a visiting card, and handed out as people just basically went around their daily business. These could be mass produced, and they were probably the most popular form that were used in Victorian times. The first used in the 1860s, they continue right up until the early 20th century. Tintypes, these produced single images, but they were much cheaper to produce than daguerreotypes or ambrotypes. They're aimed at the popular end of the market. You'll see itinerant photographers will actually use Ferrero-type, tintype photography. You'll also find them at the seaside. So you actually find in a lot of families that were working people, once they began visiting the seaside, even just for their holiday break in the 1880s, 1890s onwards, we actually began finding these kind of images in people's home collections. What do we have here? This is a postcard portrait. After 1902, portrait postcards would have been one of the most popular formats, and they continued to be used right up into the late 1940s. This is a photograph from my own family collection. It's a studio photograph taken in 1922 in New York City. There's an address on the back of the card. 947 Amsterdam Avenue in New York. Now, when we found the photograph, we knew it had to be somebody in the family. We had no idea quite who that person was. Using a commercial directory for 1922, we checked out who was living at that address, and we realized that it was Martin, a family that we are connected to. My great-grandmother Martin was her maiden name. The young woman in the photograph was my grandfather's older sister, Margaret. Margaret Fitzsimons, she's born 1892 in Nobber in County Meath. She emigrated in the teens, and she moved in with her Martin aunts living in New York. The picture is of Margaret with her fiancé, Richard Carew, and it's all the more poignant because Margaret died shortly after this photograph was taken.
Oh.
This is her photograph. The Americans mistakenly added an extra M to the name.
Okay.
Fitzsimons in Ireland, Fitzsimmons in the US.
Sure.
She died in 1923. She's buried with her Martin aunts, and Richard Carew never married subsequently, and when he died in 1937, he was buried alongside Margaret. So it's kind of poignant. There's a love story in there, yeah. This is another example of a postcard photograph, this time taken in the street. In Easter 1916, the Richmond photography studio in the city centre of Dublin was forcibly closed for a week because of the rising. The photographer couldn't earn his crust, so he decided to basically take the camera out to the street. What did he do? Rather enterprisingly, he took photographs of the soldiers who were putting down the rising, and then he sold the photographs to each of the soldiers. This photograph, in fact, was bought by one of the soldiers in the picture, and it's actually passed down now to his grandson, and I have his permission to use this. So this is actually quite a rare original photograph. They have the original print that survives. The rear of the photograph, I don't know if this is legible here. It says, Walsh, the man, the soldier, has actually written in his own hand, one of the strongholds of the rebels on the corner of Stephen's Green Park. Now, that has to be somebody from outside Ireland because no one refers to the Green Park.
Yeah.
Formal studio photographs would have been considered the best of all photographic products. This picture was taken in a Whitehall studio in London in the 1920s. This picture and this next one are of Hilda Matheson. She was an intelligence officer, in other words, a spy, and she was also a director of radio talks for the BBC. She was, I believe, their first ever lady broadcaster. It makes her sound very Agatha Christie, but I suppose of her times, the 1920s. But of course, most of us, what we have are amateur photographs. That's what we have in our collection, in family collections. And these pictures are from my own family collection. They record the day-to-day life of my family and their relations and their friends for 4 generations. I think snapshots are a wonderful source because it's one thing that's not always appreciated, but they actually give us an insight. They give us an open window into the private domestic sphere that isn't otherwise documented in virtually anywhere else, except maybe private letters or postcards or whatever. So they're wonderful to actually have.
I think it's always very funny, and I'm sure many of the grandparents on this call will agree, that when young children look at photographs now, they go, why weren't you smiling? Or why didn't you have your eyes open? Or why? And it's going, well, you got one chance to take that photo and then it was gone. And then it went to the chemist and all that. So photos like this are really powerful.
Yeah.
I love the one on the bottom right, for example.
That's my dad and my 2 aunts. Wow. My dad is looking particularly sorry for himself. It's surprising. He was a very jolly guy. But really, those are 2 sources. Those are 2 sources of evidence that I think virtually everybody has at home. I hope maybe when we finish this talk, when we finish the broadcast, people might maybe like to go and rummage in the shoebox on the top of the wardrobe or in boxes in the attic or the garage and see what photographs or what evidence they may have themselves. And maybe this talk will encourage people to, rather than floundering around, where do I start, to actually realize that you start at home and you start with what you know. So that is really my spiel for this morning.
And I'm just going to talk a little bit about this, which is a History at Home pack, which is one of the educational resources that EPIC has made available. And again, the grandparents or those of you with nieces or nephews or whatever might like this, because we want to get young people interested in their family history. We want to get young people excited about asking questions and going, who's in that photo and what did they do and whatever. So this is a free download on our website. And again, Billy will send out these links after this talk. And if you can go to the next slide, please, Fiona. So in there, there's an example using the Butler Yeats family that young people can look at and go, okay, well, I can see now how using this example, I could ask questions of my own family, of my aunts and my uncles and my grandparents and everything to find out a little bit more about what they were up to. And the next slide, please, Fiona. It talks about designing your family tree. Family trees, and we saw it was the Bellews, was that what we? The Blewitts, sorry, I beg your pardon. They don't have to be as formal as that. I mean, it's nice to see them done that way, but I love seeing children going, okay, great granddad's up on the top of the tree and I'm down at the base and all of that. And it gives them that whole idea of building or building out as well.
Dara, there's also a lot of trees online. So if you have a subscription to Ancestry or to Find My Past or to MyHeritage, people can often just go directly online and they can begin to enter the information and then print out a family tree as well. And that's a great facility to have.
Yeah, there's a, what's it called, Twile, I think, or Twilo. I must find this out as well, which makes it very easy as well. And if we go to the next slide. As Fiona says, it teaches young people how to conduct an oral history interview, which is actually how to have a chat with your granny, really, or your aunt or whatever, and do it in an organized way of having your questions prepared and talking to them about what you might be interested in finding out. And the next slide, please, Fiona. We've talked about the photographs, and actually, if you have a photograph, you can now take a photo of it using your phone and then WhatsApp it or Zoom it or Facebook it or email it or whatever to that younger person, and they can look at it. So it's not a matter of you taking it out of your shoebox, putting it in the post and hoping it gets there. We can use the technology that is available to us to get people interested in. But I assume that any of you who have grandchildren, and I know that you are all missing them because you can't see them and you haven't seen them for months. I know this, but you know that when they're in the house, you always have one eye on what press that they're in, or what ornament they're taking down, or what they're looking in the shoe boxes upstairs. And maybe you can talk to them about that as well. And then we may have one more slide. Oh yeah, there's a fact file that people can fill out and they can answer questions about. And then one more, please, Fiona. And then it tells them how they become a family history detective. It's a lovely way of getting young people involved in their family history project, and you can work with them on doing this. And Fiona, then, and that's the address, and we will send this out, as I said, through Billy at the end of this talk. And then, Fiona, you have a couple of resources that you also recommended at the end of your presentation.
Do I?
You do. If you go through the slides.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah, I think these are the main subscription websites. Findmypast.com. Find My Past has the largest online collection of Irish records. So if you're doing research for somebody based here in Ireland, this is the website you use. IrishGenealogy.ie. This is a free website provided by the Irish state. It has civil records, births, marriages, and deaths from 1864 for births and deaths, from 1845 for non-Catholic marriages, and then 1864 for all subsequent marriages. There is a cutoff date to preserve the privacy of living people. So you won't find births after 1919, marriages after 1945, or civil deaths after 1969. But that still takes us up to fairly recently. So most of us could actually still research back to parents, grandparents' generation. Ancestry.com is the one that everybody knows. It's a matter of horses for courses. I, as a professional, would have subscriptions to all the websites, but I tend to use Find My Past for the Irish at home and in Britain, and I use Ancestry for the Irish diaspora, for the Irish in the US. The National Archives.ie, this is the Irish National Archives. They have the census records online, although you will also find these on Find My Past and Ancestry. FamilySearch.org. This is a free website of the LDS, the Mormons. It is quite simply the best of all the genealogy sites. It's a free website, but you do have to register. It's great for international databases and records. If you have family who emigrated, very often what we are seeing is people tracing collateral lines. So an aunt or uncle or a great aunt and uncle who emigrated to North America or to Australia. Sometimes people come into America through Canada. Using Family Search is a very good way of tracking them. And likewise, they're good for Australian records. But if you have queries on your own family history, the Irish Family History Centre provide a range of services. We have consultancy to help you to break down the brick walls in your own research. We accept commissions, and we also run a range of talks and courses throughout the year. At the moment, this evening, I'm just finishing a 6-week course run with the South County Dublin libraries. Everything we've done this year has been online. That's very good for beginners and intermediate. For more advanced, I also do a 2-year course with Trinity College in Dublin. And that will take you straight through from beginner right the way through to advanced. This year, we moved online via Zoom. It's been so successful, I think we're going to be doing that subsequently in coming years. So if anybody has ever thought they would like to really get to grips with family history, that could be another good one. Registration for the second term is open now through Trinity College in Dublin.
Very good. And Flavia, if you can go back 5 slides, maybe just there. Fiona's details are here if people want to contact you. The one thing that I will say about the Irish Family History Centre, Fiona, is that even though you go in and you feel stupid asking the questions, your team don't make you feel that those are stupid questions, because there is no such thing as a stupid question, because you've heard them all at this stage and you actually genuinely want to help.
It's all about unlocking information. And sometimes we find people actually know the answer themselves. What we're trying to do is we're trying to almost tease it out. And sometimes people don't have that clear answer. And so we have to go and look at the records. But with the evidence they provide us, it's usually possible to come up to the immigrant ancestor, to the person that they're tracing. But it really comes back to this idea, every person has a story that is worth knowing and that is worth preserving and passing on to the next generation.
And the thing I love about those stories, especially working in this museum, is you never know when your story interacts with my story, interacts with Flavia's story or Billy's story or whatever. And suddenly we all have a shared person. You know, it's quite sad. And I realize that this is a little bit morbid, but I read RIP.ie every day and I read the condolences of people and I see names that I know and I go, I never knew that that person knew that person. They worked with them many years ago and everything like that.
That's true.
So there's quite extraordinary there. We have a question in from Eileen that says, when will the 1922 census records be published?
Eileen, there was no 1922 census. After 1911, we had a system in place that a census was published every 10 years. But what's happening in 1921, the War of Independence? And even after that, we went straight into the Civil War. So the next census taken after 1911 was 1926. The 1926 census, I have it on good authority from the National Archives, will be published on the 1st of January 2027. Okay. So a strict adherence to the 100-year rule.
Okay, very good. And I don't know if it's the same, Eileen, but what is the cost of a consultation with the Irish Family History Centre? I know it varies, but can you give me it probably starts at and then goes to?
I think it starts from €50 and it goes to, it goes up from
It goes
there.
up.
It
Yeah.
really depends about how much time and about the level of complexity. That said, if you work with a professional, although there is a cost, you might actually find that it's like having, when the children's stories about having 7 league boots, that you suddenly find yourself moving forward much faster. This is what we do. I suppose we've been doing this consistently for 25 odd years. We've got a great team in place. Helen and I have been working together for over 20 years. Our team are trained professionals. Everyone has a qualification in history or related degree at postgraduate level. We know the sources and we move like the wind if it can be answered. And I do actually stress that because we haven't got a magic wand. I can't guarantee that we're going to give a full resolution, that we're going to bring everyone back 8, 9, 10 generations. We haven't got a magic wand, but we will, if the surviving evidence, we'll find an answer for you.
Which is great. Edna would like to know, what is the best way to access Army records?
Army records are one of the big classes of records that have been digitized. I like to use 2 sites, Find My Past and Ancestry. I think Find My Past has the most complete digitization of Army records. You'll actually find service records from 1760 through to the early 20th century there. A word of warning, in World War II, the Luftwaffe, the famous London Blitz, they bombed Greenwich and they bombed the archive and they destroyed they destroyed the archives and they destroyed somewhere in the region of half, maybe a little over half of service records of men and the small number of women that served in World War I. But you can sometimes work your way around. This is something in Irish genealogy that we're very used to doing, working our way around gaps in the records. Even though the original service records, more than half of them have been destroyed, you can use other sources, like you can use the Army medals that were given out for service to actually track an individual. You can sometimes track, what else can you look at? If you know what regiment they were a part of, what company they were a part of, you can look at regimental diaries and you can get literally an account day by day of what your person of interest, be it a grandfather or a great uncle, what they would have experienced on a day by day as they went through a campaign. This is another good reason to consult the Irish Family History Centre, because we know all the different ways of bridging the gaps, where the original records have been destroyed, how you can use collateral records to try and find out more and recover those family narratives.
The 100-year rule, that just means that researchers and the public can't get access to those records. But if I wanted to see my grandparents' wedding certificate from the 1950s or the 1960s, can I get access to that? Can I apply to get that? Yes.
You can. And in fact, the 100-year rule applies to the 100-year rule applies to the census. It also applies to many records held in archives. But civil records, births, marriages, and deaths are public records. So you, but also any other member of the public, if they present themselves at Werburgh Street, the General Register office there, they can actually search and call up your grandparents' marriage record.
Very good. Okay, that's good to know. I think it's always a great Christmas or birthday present for somebody to know.
It is. Do you know why? Because your grandparents will both have signed the marriage record. So it's a lovely little thing to have.
I think so.
It's very personal.
Eileen is great for the questions. Thank you, Eileen. Now, does RIC records, do you know what RIC records are?
Royal Irish Constabulary.
Great.
And
Does RIC records include the birthplace of those who joined the RIC in the mid-1800s?
No, it doesn't include the birthplace. Well, records change over time. What it often includes is the name of a person who's acted as a reference, so that you can look at that person, check their name in a commercial directory, because it's usually a local justice of the peace or the local landlord who has acted as a referee. And when you find out what district they're from, then you usually know the home place of your ancestor who served in the RIC. RIC and DMP, Dublin Metropolitan Police records, are digitized and they're available online on Find My Past. And I should add that a lot of the libraries in Dublin and I think in Wicklow have a subscription to Find My Past, so that if you are a member of the library, you can go in and you can ask for access to it.
Yes, and it's on the Borrow Box app as well for the libraries as well, because that's where I read it. So there you go. Billy, I'm going to come over to you.
I was just going to, thanks, Dara. I was just going to interject. And first of all, Fiona, that was fascinating, and thank you very much. I had a couple of queries myself that I was just thinking about in recent times. Well, earlier this year, my mother's oldest sister passed away, and we were going through some of her stuff, and one of the things we found was that obviously an old box of photographs, and the difficulty, I suppose, in identifying people in them is that nobody has written anything on the back of it. So you don't have any names, you don't have any places, you don't have the dates. And I just think that's something maybe that we should maybe almost do while we can before it gets too late. Would you agree with something like that, so that we can actually, as a photograph is handed down, then at least it can be identified in some shape or form?
I absolutely agree. Nowadays, it's possible to tag your photographs with a date and a place, even down to a GPS. What you can do, and this is something that I have done a little bit of in the past, I've taken out old family photographs. I've sat down with my aunt who celebrated her 81st birthday just last week. So happy birthday, Deirdre O'Connor. I've sat down with her and I have written down the names of people and the place where it is. And then based on the ages, once I know who the people are, I can usually come up with the approximate date of when it happened. Some are obvious, like, I can look at my grandparents' marriage and I know what's happening. Some are less obvious, where it's just everyone sitting around on a sunny day at a picnic or at the beach. And you, I suppose, knowing the ages of the people, it helps you to say, well, if that person was 4 or 5, then it must have been 1935, 1936.
Very good.
So you can do it retrospectively as well.
I was just, as you were talking, as I said, when we were going through some family photographs, I did come across this one recently, and I'm going to share it very quickly, and I'm going to make it disappear very quickly also. But when we were talking this week, the 8th of December, as a family thing, we came to Dublin always on the 8th of December, and this was myself and my 2 brothers in Switzerland meeting Santa Claus. So that now disappears very fast. But I came across that one recently, and I don't have a date on it. I'm trying to guess what age I was when that was taken.
Which one was you, Billy?
Oh, I'm not showing it again. That's it. It's gone forever. It's disappeared. But can I just say thank you very much to Fiona, to Dara, to the guys in Dogpatch, to the guys in CHQ and EPIC, and thank you very much for that this morning. Before I kind of wrap up the session, this is the last of our webinar series for this year. And what I would like to do, maybe just very quickly, is I'm going to put up a series of couple of questions that you might just, you should see them on your screen there now. If you wouldn't mind just ticking the boxes that you think are kind of answering your answers for the questions. It's just so that we can kind of, I suppose, gauge the reaction to the series, and also to see whether you would like us to continue with this into the new year. In talking to Dara, I think this is something that we will endeavour to carry on further at another stage when we were talking yesterday. So I will come back to you with news about that and how EPIC and ourselves can develop this a little bit further.
And just to say, Billy, thank you very much for the opportunity. And we would love to see some of you who are confident enough to travel into Dublin to come and visit EPIC and the Irish Family History Centre. We're open 7 days a week. We're all on one level. So there's no stairs. There's plenty of places to sit. Restrooms are available very easily. Coffee is available very easily. So it's actually quite comfortable. And as you can see from the other people who are on this call who have been there, it is quite an interesting place. So I hope that you're inspired by it. And wearing this jumper, I'm also going to take the opportunity now to give you all my first happy Christmas, and have a lovely festive season, whatever you get up to, however or your family gets involved. But maybe, as Fiona said, maybe this Christmas is the one that you take out the photos and you say, let's start a project. Let's do something together and work out what our family history is.
Yeah, I think it would be, it's an opportunity, I think, for all of us who have been kind of, I suppose, tied to our houses or wherever we live for time. Maybe we've actually already started to do that. And I think it's something we should share with our families.
Indeed.
Is that lady?
Hello, hello. May I speak?
Yes, indeed.
I have a message for Annette. Annette, when you said about Bernadette Cahill,
Yes.
I know her, and I rang her immediately, and she said that I told her that your emails were not being delivered.
Thank you.
They were coming back in undeliverable, and so she said, I asked her to get in touch with you again. Her husband unfortunately wasn't there, and she doesn't know how to do Zoom, so that's why she wasn't able to get on. But I told her to check on the email and maybe get back to you again.
Grant, what I might do there is, Annette, you might send Liz your phone number there, maybe in a private message, and we can make contact with Bernie. So we didn't want her to feel left out because we weren't dancing or something.
Yeah, I tried. Even there was one she tried for Roddy Doyle, and I have it highlighted because it just wouldn't, and I didn't know where she was sending it from. So I'll get in touch with you.
She's in the Dean's Grange area,
Okay,
and she's in the U3A, Blackrock U3A. But she doesn't do Zoom, and her husband had just left the house, of course.
Okay. Right, well, listen, thank you very much, Liz. That's brilliant. So we were able to contact her because we didn't want her to feel that we were ignoring her or letting her out.
No,
so, yeah.
no.
Thank you for taking part in the polls. Thank you for taking part in the webinars. If this is your first one, we will certainly let you know about other ones that are happening and in the new year. These are the results of some of the questions that we've been asking, just so as you can see those before we wrap up. And I know the guys in Dogpatch are controlling this, so I'm going to, oh sorry, I think I'm still a host as well, so I can end this call, guys, if that's all right. If anybody has anything else to add before we go, now's your opportunity.
Thank you so much. It was brilliant. Really enjoyed that.
Great.
On behalf of all of us in Age Action, I hope you all have a great Christmas. As Jared says, in whatever shape or form it takes, and you know where we are if we can be of any assistance to you also in the next while. And we will be in touch with you in the new year then, hopefully with a new series of webinars. So thank you all and good morning to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and happy Christmas, everyone, if we don't speak again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.